Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin. Our guest today is Dr. Mallory Preston. She is a veterinary graduate of Texas A&M University. She's a mental health advocate and founder of the Not One More Vet Texas Chapter. Dr. Preston, how are you doing this afternoon?
I am doing fabulously, and thank you so much for having me on today. I'm so excited to share my experiences with your listeners.
Well, it's my pleasure. This is one of those topics that came across my radar a little while back, and I was kind of shocked to find out the mental health crisis going on in the veterinary community, which is near and dear to my heart. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your affiliation with Not One More Vet and sort of what is going on in that world right now?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So, yes, I'm Mallory Preston. I'm actually mainly a small animal veterinarian based in Houston, Texas. And I attended Auburn University for undergraduate degree. I actually didn't end up getting a degree. I went straight from being a junior to going straight to vet school. So I don't have a bachelor's degree at all, which makes resume writing extremely challenging. And essentially, I grew up with my dad, who's a veterinarian as well. And so I actually grew up with him working in his practice since I was a young child, since I could walk. He actually was a practice owner and he saw small animals and exotic animals and wildlife. And so I got to really tune into all of those experiences from a very early age. My funniest memory and story that I have from working with my dad, it was when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And I went to go help my dad at like 3 a.m. to go help him with an emergency C-section on a pregnant dog. And actually, it was a cat. And the pregnant cat did really, really well. We were able to get all of the kittens out of the uterus. And it was my job to rub them and keep them stable and active, get them breathing, make sure to keep them warm. And I was also in charge of giving them oxygen. And so I was doing that with my dad as he was closing up the female animal that had just had surgery. And I walked in with the kitten and I said, "Dad, this cat doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all." And I had no idea what I was talking about. And the cat was fine. Okay. So luckily, now that I've been through schooling, I've been through vet school, I actually know when a kitten is doing poorly. And so luckily, my comic relief skills have only improved since I became a veterinarian. But I learned a lot from my dad, and he's been such an influential person in my life. I actually got involved with Not One More Vet, which is a mental health nonprofit for veterinary professionals in 2021. I wanted to kind of mention a little bit about what NOMV is. And essentially, NOMV is a nonprofit organization that started as a Facebook group in 2014. And this was in response to the suicide of world-renowned veterinarian Sophia Yin. And since then, it's become much more than a Facebook group. It's now a full-fledged nonprofit agency that provides support to veterinary professionals all over the world. And so it's actually a group of a few staff members. I believe we have 11 or 12 staff members right now, and many, many volunteers that help vet professionals through peer-to-peer support, local ambassador chapters, financial support grants, education presentations, and then we even collaborate with mental health agencies to extend their services to the veterinary community specifically. This has created a lot more accessibility for our members and our professionals that we help. They also created a clinic certification program to help promote a healthy mental wellness centered culture across the profession. And they even developed a cyberbullying task force to help clinics and individuals prevent and respond to cyberbullying campaigns. Not One More Vet is actually not just for veterinarians, it's also for veterinary technicians, veterinary students, and other veterinary support staff like receptionists and practice managers. Our main mission at Not One More Vet is to transform the status of mental wellness within the profession so that veterinary professionals can therefore survive and thrive through education, resources, and support. I got involved with Not One More Vet in 2021 just as a small little volunteer. I barely did any work. And I ended up becoming very, very involved and very passionate about this. I started out as just a small volunteer, but I was able to help develop our ambassadors program, which is essentially a community organization. So we put small chapters into local communities to help increase our reach and provide more local support. And I actually founded the first Not One More Vet chapter, NOMV Texas. And so it's been a whirlwind. It's been extremely challenging, but also very rewarding. And we're actually going international this year. So it's been a really, really amazing experience. And I want to tell you a little bit more about why I do what I do and why mental wellness in the profession is so important. Essentially, I wanted to talk about some of the statistics that kind of highlight the problems that we're facing as veterinary professionals, because this is so important. So I wanted to talk about a few statistics. A 2018 study by the CDC found that male vets are 1.6 times more likely and female vets are 2.4 times more likely to die by suicide compared to the general population. And it's even worse off for veterinary technicians. Male techs are 5 times more likely, and female techs are 2.3 times more likely to die by suicide. So this is a huge problem. JAVMA in 2019, one of their studies showed that 1 in 6 vets have experienced suicidal ideation. So out of all the 6 vets that you see, throughout your life, one of those has had suicidal thoughts or thought about, committing suicide. And so that's a really, really big number, considering how many vets we have out there in the world. And just to kind of take that into perspective, each class right now has between like 120 and 160 vet students. And so the fact that so many of those individuals may be suffering silently is kind of daunting. It also showed that 1 in 10 vets have been diagnosed with depression and 1 in 4 have symptoms of severe anxiety. So this is just a systemic issue. I think that this is a really, really important issue. And I think that we're going to highlight some of the ways that we can make things better, both for pet parents and for veterinary professionals alike.
So I'm going to just take a stab in the dark here, but the real problem behind all of this is cats, right? It's got to be cats. Yeah. Okay. I knew it. Y'all can't see her
it's
face.
Totally cats. It's totally cats. Cats are the main reasons to blame. And, putting it on anybody else would be unfair.
Absolutely. It's obvious right there in front of our face. It's always fluffy. I remember when my wife and I got together, we adopted a cat, went to an animal shelter, paid $80 for this thing or something like that, had to sign all kind of forms about we wouldn't let it go outside and all of that. And I'm like, we drove past 5 signs of free kittens coming to this place. There's cats everywhere. Now we have like 17 barn cats. So, okay, back to the seriousness of the situation. So we have a mental health crisis in the veterinary community, which I think most people would not be aware of. I wasn't aware of it, and I have a bunch of friends that are veterinarians, way more than most people would. So is this something that has come on suddenly, or has it been with us for a long period of time? Sort of why now? I guess other than cats, what would be the root cause of this problem?
Yeah, so I think it's been going on forever. I think things have been amplified with modernization of technology and, access to online reviews, things like that. But I do think it's been happening for a long time. I think another reason that we hear more about it now is our younger generations of vets are a lot better at self-disclosure. So we have a lot more vets that are talking about this problem, whereas in the past, some of the older generations suffered in silence. And so we do have quite a few triggers for veterinary professionals, and these have been backed up by research. The main one is being the bearer of bad news. And so having to give a difficult diagnosis to a client about their pet is never a fun thing to do. It brings a lot of anxiety, especially as the client interprets and responds to what is being told to them. Another reason would be, having to discuss euthanasia with a client that may not be ready to hear that. That's a really big component. I also think vet professionals have a lot of financial issues, and this especially goes for vet techs and support staff. They are typically not paid nearly compared to what they're worth. But veterinarians also have a lot of financial issues. We do make about a quarter of what a human doctor would make, but we have a substantially higher debt to income ratio. And so many of us are graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and not making enough to make a dent in, those payments. And so it's important to realize that we have to keep the lights on. We have to pay our staff, and we want to pay our staff well. So sometimes prices increase, and having those difficult conversations with clients about finances is a big problem. Managing medical complications, that's an obvious one. It's usually not due to the fault of the vet themselves. Usually it's something out of their control. But it's still not fun to have to deal with that, especially if the client thinks it was, something that you did. One of the newest and hardest things that I personally have dealt with is cyberbullying. So negative online reviews. An AVMA 2014 survey actually found that 1 in 5 vets have been affected by cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is such a big issue, and it's mainly previous clients and staff members that are to blame for the cyberbullying attacks. And actually, they were responsible for 7 out of every 10 attacks. So that's pretty substantial. I think another really big issue that is a big source of discouragement is unrealistic expectations of our clients. We do have days off that we're not working. We have appointments and surgeries when we are working. And so sometimes we're not available as clients would like us to be. And so that's definitely a big struggle. I think clients expect a lot from us and pressure us to do more than we're physically able to do. I also think some clients have poor boundaries, and honestly, veterinary professionals have equally poor boundaries. And so, I never want to get home after a hard day of work and find a Facebook message that says, from a call or an acquaintance that I knew in high school that I haven't talked to since high school, asking unsolicited veterinary advice. Not my ideal idea of a date night or a night in, if you will. So that's a big reason. Also, there's a lot of excessive communication that goes on. When you go to the human doctor, you talk to them at the appointment, you may send them a couple follow-up emails, and then that's really all the communication that you have until your next visit. Veterinary clients are a little bit different. They have a little bit higher expectations for the amount of communication that they'd like to have with their provider. And so that's a big struggle that we have. And so it's important to be realistic with those goals and understand that veterinarians may not be able to respond to your email within 24 hours, or we may be in another appointments or dealing with emergencies when you're trying to contact us on the phone. It's also important to note that all of those communications are not billable. So we're doing a whole lot extra without very much gain. And so it is sometimes a challenging aspect of our job. We love the fact that we get to bond with clients, but this is something that we can't do 24 hours a day, unfortunately. The best example of triggers and reasons why veterinary professionals are committing suicide every single day is an obituary excerpt that I got regarding an actual equine veterinarian that chose to take her life in March of this year. And her name was Dr. Kathleen Lennon. And she was a renowned equine show veterinarian. And I think she was based in Ohio. Here is that excerpt. It says, Kathleen was a perfectionist and was so dedicated that she would relentlessly try to figure out solutions how to best help her patients. Ever the diplomat and kind-hearted soul, she worked as hard on a backyard horse as she did on a prize-winning champion. Kathleen never silenced her phone and was constantly called out in the middle of the night to rescue horses that needed veterinary care. Kathleen almost never took a day off because so many clients loved her brilliance and dedication that soon her practice quickly outpaced the number of hours in a day. So Kathleen was expected to go beyond what was capable of any human. And I think that these mental health struggles that typically veterinarians are dealing with makes it really hard to deal with these pressures. Daniel, I would say that I would like to, before we get to all the negative stuff, can I mention some positives about veterinary medicine?
Please, absolutely.
Okay. Just because I want to make sure that this is brought up because I don't want it to be like all doom the whole time. So there are so many positive aspects to my job. I absolutely love my job, and I knew that this was what I wanted to do since I was a little girl. I love solving difficult medical cases and surgical cases. I love seeing second opinion appointments where, someone else couldn't find out the answer and I'm able to. I love seeing the human animal bond and witnessing my clients' love and dedication for their pets. I also really enjoy getting to know the personalities of my furry patients and scaly and you name it, because all of them have such bright personalities and really warm my heart every time I see them, every time they come in. I also love building lifelong relationships with both my colleagues that I meet at these jobs, as well as the pet parents that help make my job so fulfilling. I also think the highest honor that we have in this career is the ability to end the suffering of an animal that really needs to be let go. And so this is something that is a difficult part of my job, but it also brings me a lot of purpose. And I feel that the negatives of this situation are not overshadowed by how proud I am to be able to help animals in that way.
From my own experience, in fact, hearing you talk about all of this, I'm like your Facebook comment a little bit ago. I'm sitting here thinking I was answering Facebook messages until about 11 o'clock last night. I probably ought to knock that crap off a little bit. Maybe 6 p.m. is a reasonable time for me to stop. And as you say, that's not billable hours too, right? So spending a few hours a day for free answering questions. Maybe I need to take a little of this to heart as well. I had another point I was going to make there. Well,
It'll come.
yeah, it'll pop up later on. So one of the aspects that you have mentioned here as being part of the challenge and the trigger that veterinarians are facing is the relationship with the owners and the expectations that some of the owners have. I have a Facebook group called Bit Spurs and Good Sense, and whenever I'm doing a podcast like this, I always let that group know. So in that Facebook group, whenever I'm about to do one of these interviews, I generally tell the group, hey, I'm about to interview such and such, and here's kind of their background. What questions might you have? The most repeated question in there was, what can we as customers do to make our veterinarians' lives easier? So what are some of the practical things that y'all wish customers would do to make your lives easier?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And I really appreciate your listeners being curious about this. I think the best way that we can help improve the burden and reduce the burden that veterinary professionals are under is to prioritize giving positive feedback and appreciation and holding back whenever you have a negative experience. And holding back may mean, taking a few days to think about the situation, calling that veterinarian up and discussing some issues that they dealt with during the visit so that we can constructively work to make it better next time for that exact pet and that exact pet parent, and also improve the experience of our future clients. And so there are many benefits to providing positive feedback, and that's because it boosts morale, it enhances job satisfaction, it makes us want to be there, and it reminds us of, why we're here. It also promotes well-being because it reduces stress, it enhances self-esteem, and it also reinforces the positive behaviors that are so important to veterinary clients. And that's just something that is really, really important to remember. The more positive experiences the veterinary professional has at work, the more positive your experience is also going to be. The main benefits of being understanding when there's a negative issue or incident is there's many. One of those is to encourage open communication. And so being understanding when a negative issue arises allows us to communicate openly about the challenges that you're experiencing. And so it creates a safe space for you to seek support and for me to gain insight on how I can change what I'm doing to better your experience. It's also helpful in fostering trust and respect. It facilitates that constructive feedback loop so that we can actually do something about it rather than rehashing the emotions surrounding that incident. And it also supports my personal growth. And so those are all really, really important as far as how to make the lives of veterinary professionals a little bit easier. It's also important to understand that the way our pet parents present themselves at appointments does affect the pet's overall care. And so it's important that we provide very clear instructions, whether that be for medication administration, home care, behavioral management. It's also important for education and preventative care. It affects the pet's emotional and behavioral well-being because we're able to focus on some of those more minute points. And then it also helps us with early detection and intervention. And so you'll be able to tell us as soon as you notice any changes in your pet's behavior or symptoms. There are some tips that I have that will help improve your communication and help increase your participation in veterinary appointments, because I think it's so important that we empower our pet parents to take an active role in their pet's health. And so the first thing that I would highly recommend anybody do is prior to the appointment, prepare for the appointment. Make notes about any concerns or questions that you have, especially regarding their health and even their behavior. Behavior is something that's often forgotten about. And this helps ensure that all the important topics are covered during the visit. Be very clear and concise during your appointment. We love hearing about, all the amazing stories you have about your family and things like that. But we also want to make sure that the pet is the primary concern during the appointment. We want to make sure that all your questions are answered. So please be clear, provide specific details and examples, and that will help me understand the situation a little bit better. It's also important that you ask questions during the appointment. So if you need further clarification, the veterinary professional is there to address your concerns and provide any explanation that may be needed. We also want you to take an active role, and some of that goes with active listening. So make sure you're not on your phone. Try really hard to just really reflect on what we're saying, take notes if necessary. A lot of my clients do that, and it greatly helps our success overall as far as the outcomes of the patient's case. And I also highly encourage you to be involved in the discussion. This is a team building exercise. We are a team. I'm here to help you make the decisions for your pet. And so I want to hear your ideas about treatment options, potential risks, expected outcomes, you name it. I want to hear your preferences, your concerns. I want to collaborate with you. I don't want to lecture you. I want to be here for you so that together we can make the best decision for your pet. And so those are some ways that I think will greatly help the day-to-day business of the veterinarian while also improving the experience of the pet owners themselves.
If I could just interject there with a little more horse directed deal, have your damn horse caught and not muddy and nasty and disgusting before the vet or the farrier gets there. If you're going to haul into an appointment, we all know that sometimes horses don't like to load up on a random Tuesday. So try to be early and not late, because if you're late, you're messing up someone's whole day there potentially. One thing I know, I'm just because I have a lot of friends that are in this business, pay your bill on time. don't expect to have that go a month before you decide to take care of it. And one other thing that that one of my vet friends, I did a lot of preparation. I called probably a dozen people or talked to a dozen of my vet friends in preparation for this interview, and this one came up twice. So do not mistake your possession of a web browser for his or her medical degree. I know you said the team building exercise, and that's all good, but people can go a little bit crazy into a Facebook chat room or something like that, and all of a sudden they're off the rails. So you should definitely treat your vet as your primary source of information here, and maybe the other stuff supports it a little bit, and you have to also just always remember that people can be wrong on the internet. It is not a reliable source of information. All right, I had to get that off of my chest. Sorry. Just play the devil's advocate here a little bit. A couple of the things that I've seen change in the last 30 years or so in veterinary medicine is that we now have, if you're in a remotely urban area, there's likely an emergency medical hospital for veterinary care. So the vets aren't necessarily on call at 2 a.m. anymore. There's going to be a specific hospital that handles that sort of stuff. And also, 30 years ago, I don't have an actual number here, but I would bet 80% of the vet practices were single vet or maybe two vet practices. And now multiple vets, 6, 8 vets, 20 vets in some of these big practices is relatively common. So they're not all on call every weekend and so forth, and they can get a break. So it seems to me that we have made some pretty big strides on opening up time and giving a personal life back to some of these veterinarians. So with that being said, why haven't we seen a benefit of that? Or am I just missing it? Why is there still so much stress on the vets causing all of this when they have, I would say factually, most vets have way more personal time now than they would have had 30 years ago. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I do think that the structure of clinics is changing in a very positive direction. I think we're having more emergency clinics so that our clients can access care after hours, allowing general practitioners more work-life balance. I do think that, having more than one doctor in a practice, you kind of mentioned earlier that, there's very few instances where you have a single doctor practice. They're still out there, but there's fewer of them. And that's a really important point. But I think the main reason is that we're still having trouble is that the culture itself is not changing. So I think the main reason that's the case is because some of the client behaviors that we've been reinforcing have led this to continue. And so I think one of the best things that we can do is highlight the importance of the pet parent having a role in fostering this environment. And so we want the environment to be empathetic. We want to make sure both parties are heard. And so the way that we can do that is, having better communication, being really clear and concise, making sure that you show empathy and understanding towards the veterinary professional that you're working with, and recognizing that the demands and challenges can be very, very difficult for them to deal with. Pet owners can offer words of encouragement. They can express gratitudes. They can show appreciation by bringing food. Everybody loves a good food, meal break. Also, respectful behavior is a really important issue. Making sure that you're positive and respectful, even if there's a long wait time or your bill is higher than you were expecting. There are so many ways that pet parents can help foster a culture that allows our veterinary professionals to thrive. And so I think that it's a combination of issues. And I don't think, fixing the structure is going to help anything until we fix the culture itself.
So you had talked about cyberbullying and all of that a minute ago, and I wanted to go into that a little bit with an experience one of my very good friends had. He had an employee that he had to terminate, and she was bullying. I think they got into an actual fight, and he had to separate them at the clinic, that employee and another employee. So he had to get rid of her, and then that young lady retaliated against him by turning him into the DEA and the state veterinary medical board and that kind of stuff, and just made a bunch of false allegations. And as I'm sure you're aware, in that world, you're kind of guilty until proven innocent. He wound up getting out all of it. He was vindicated in the end, but not before he had $15,000 in lawyer fees and those sorts of things. And the young lady that caused all this trouble, nothing happens to her. He even told me she came back like 2 years later and reapplied for a job again, as though, yeah, that was really the world we live in. But so, have you heard many experiences like that? And then you have the cyberbullying. And on another note, with the cyberbullying, I would wonder what percentage of those people own a dog less than 15 pounds, because that seems to be a distinction to me. The small dog people and everyone else, right? The Yorkie world. Maybe I'm hitting a little too close to home there, but anyway.
Yeah, I do think that studies have shown that cyberbullying is more prominent among small animal veterinarians rather than large animal and equine veterinarians. And so I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It definitely is a small animal issue, and the smaller the pet, possibly, the more complaints that you may find. It's not unusual for a vet to get at least one board complaint a year. Most of these are completely unfounded and they're fine. Every once in a while, they will be a founded complaint. This is something that's a really big issue. I have personally dealt with cyberbullying. I've also almost been physically assaulted at the vet clinic before as well. Of course, most of this occurred during COVID. So during when I don't know what life was like for equine animal owners, but I do know that for small animal, we were mainly curbside. And so people would be bringing their pets in. They could not come into the building themselves. We would have runners go out and get the pet and bring them back in. And so there was a lot of distrust between clients and the veterinary community at that time because they couldn't see what was happening through the closed doors. And so I had one instance where I saved a pet from hypovolemic shock that was having seizures, and the dog did amazing. He got to leave the hospital that day. I saw the owner in the parking lot and thought that he was coming to say thank you. So I go outside and wanted to ask how the pet was doing and, just to see how everything's going and see if I need to help in any other way. And he starts trying to physically assault me, saying that I made everything up and the dog was not actively seizing in his arms when he brought him in. And it was an insane, terrifying experience. I had my staff call the police. We had to lock all the doors. He was trying to break in. So these are situations that can get violent. And I think over the computer is 10 times worse than any physical altercation I will ever have, because hearing what people are willing to say behind a computer screen can be very devastating. And so personally, I don't look at reviews anymore due to how detrimental the negative reviews have become for me in my professional and personal life.
I think that's fair enough. One of my this is a band that's much older than you are, but you familiar with the band Rush from Canada? Three-piece
No.
band. You'd know some of their songs, I'm sure. But anyway, they had a drummer who's widely regarded as the greatest rock and roll drummer of all time, Neil Peart. And he was also an intellectual. He wrote many, many books and things. Very atypical drummer. So there's a little shout at all my drummers out there that might be listening. But he had the statement that I thought was brilliant, that he didn't read any of his reviews or press, because if he believed the good press, he would have to believe the bad press too. So he just totally kept it out of his world, and I think that's a wonderful way to go about it. I know one of the, I mean, it's probably why I have a job in the first place, but there is a very large disconnect in the customer base regarding their ability to look at and discern what is actually going on with their animal. So they could have a very strongly held belief that this is what's happening right now, and they could be very, very wrong, much like the owner holding a dog seizing but not recognizing the signs. And I would have to say, of the bad, there's a few people out there that aren't real happy with me. Two of them at least that vehemently hate me right now, I've been over backwards and practically worked a miracle for them, and they have no idea how good of a job I really did do given what I had to work with. But it's not because they're bad people, it's just because they don't recognize what's really sitting there in front of them. And I don't know that there's a solution for that. We can keep trying to educate those people, but that's never a fully solvable goal. So,
Yeah, it's really challenging, and I think ignorance is bliss when it comes to reviews. The other side of things, though, is that it's important that we respond to them so that we help change the direction that this is going. But I think it's best if like a practice manager does that and always make sure to have the veterinarians back. But I do think that it's important that we learn to respond. And actually, in some states, you're not even allowed to respond or delete negative reviews. And so it can be detrimental to the reputation of veterinarians and the staff that they work with. So it's important that we kind of find a balance between addressing those concerns and making sure that the client feels heard, but making sure that it stays constructive, and then ignoring and not looking at the reviews so that we can stay in this blissful state of ignorance.
so this is a little off of the topic of NOMV, but what are your thoughts on firing clients? I don't do it very often, but
I
yeah, sometimes there are people that life's just too short to work with. So you need to just separate yourself and say, you're not my customer. I'm sorry, I don't believe I can help you. Have you had experience with that? I'm assuming the man that
yes,
attacked
so
you in the parking lot is no longer a customer.
I did fire that client. Yes. After he assaulted me, the police came, and once the police were there, I grabbed his medical records and took him out to him and said, "You can review the case for yourself, and you need to find another veterinarian." So yes, I do fire clients. I personally, and I think more people should be in this wheelhouse, I personally have a zero tolerance policy. If you abuse me in any way, whether it be emotionally, psychologically, physically, I will not stand for it. So I do fire clients. It doesn't happen very often. I totally am understanding when a client is having a difficult day and they're being reactive, or they are projecting whatever's going on in their lives. And so I try to be understanding of those types of extenuating circumstances. But if, a client curses at a veterinary professional, if they try to make them feel, horrible about the job that they're doing or the amount that they're charging for their services, I think that those clients need to be directed elsewhere. I think the more we allow clients to treat us disrespectfully, the more this culture of abuse continues, and the worse our mental health will be in the veterinary field. So I think it's really important that we direct and change the trajectory of our clients' behaviors.
That seems fair enough for me. Have you ever thought of clicker training people? Like just a little, they say something nice, you got it in your pocket. Here, would you like a mint or something like that? Or no?
Yeah, it's like on the Big Bang Theory when Sheldon learns to train his girlfriend with chocolate, and he's like, "Have a chocolate, have a
Uh-huh.
chocolate." Yeah, very similar. Yeah, positive reinforcement works, people.
This is about the part where we normally have our fake sponsor for the episode. We decided that given the seriousness of the conversation that we're having, that we were going to just do away with the tomfoolery on this particular episode. So y'all can catch a new fake sponsor on the next podcast to come out. We talked a minute ago about the emergency clinics and the multi-partner practices. My feeling that a potential significant solution for this problem of overworked veterinarians lies within the vet tech community. And a lot of people may not know, but vet techs actually have like a 2-year degree, and they are licensed. They have to pass tests and so forth. And from what I gather, there is not a very strong standard of exactly what they are allowed to do. Some clinics are a little more reliant on their services and may let them do more. Other clinics, not so much. But what if that pool of resource was expanded and we wound up with a further licensing or something that was similar to what we have with nurse practitioners, where now the vet techs could handle in a supervised manner more of the day-to-day tasks of the clinic, freeing up the veterinarians to it seems like it's a win-win-win-win-win because we are coming up into a shortage of veterinarians, especially equine veterinarians. There's overwork, the service providing problems, so it seems like an obvious solution to me. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea. It took a little bit of time and discussion for me to come around to the idea because I wasn't 100% sure what I would be comfortable with as far as a technician doing more independent work under my license. But I think if we could make, some adjustments, I think it's definitely the right call. And so multiple states are considering this higher level veterinary technician position that's similar to it, like a nurse practitioner for humans, like you said. And I think it's great. I think we're about 50-50 on the topic. I think that 50% of the people are still not 100% sure that that's what they want to do. I think they're worried about the legal and medical ramifications of it, which I think is totally fair. For me, the one downside would be, or discussion I'd like to have more about, would be the DEA issues. So having controlled drugs makes me a little bit nervous. And so at this point, technicians cannot have a DEA license. And so I think it's important that we maintain the strict legal requirements that are brought forth by the DEA for those things. But for everything else, I think we should go ahead with the process of giving technicians more responsibility and compensating them equally so. And so I think that this is a fabulous idea, and I think that everybody should consider it. I think it's going to solve multiple issues, including veterinarian workload, as well as veterinary technician, lack of independence and poor pay. So I think it's the way to go, and it's the way of the future for sure.
What about, and I don't know if this, well, I'm going to scratch that. I think this is probably something you see even more than horse veterinarians see, but we talk about sort of the cooperation and the partnership of the owners and the veterinarian in managing the health of the animal. One of the things that I see a tremendous amount of is just the simple practices of things like managing a horse's weight or a dog or a cat's weight. I mean, how much better health would some of these dogs and cats that are 50% heavier than they ideally should be? Like, that's not really a veterinarian's fault or responsibility, but they're going to get blamed for some of the ramifications of, we're on our third leg surgery, doc. Like, can't you fix my dog? You're like, no, a weenie dog's not supposed to weigh 57 pounds, Mrs. Smith. That's really what the problem is here. We see that a lot in the horse world now, that people are wanting to take care of their animals and they're kind of killing them with kindness. They've got them overweight and obese. The supplement load is, I think we're producing some of the most expensive urine on the planet, personally, in the horse world right now with all of the supplements that we're giving some of these things. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that a education issue or ignorance, or is it a resistant people believing that they're doing good things for their animal, or they're choosing the short-term kindness and doing the long-term harm? What do you think about that? Do you see a lot of that in your world?
I think clients mean well. I think they are trying to do what's best for their animal, and especially with the obesity epidemic, they don't consider the health ramifications of being obese. They just see that their pet seems happier. And so oftentimes they supplement their food excessively. So I think it is kind of we've always done it this way. Why is there a need to change? I think there's definitely a resistance component to this. But I think some of it is that veterinary professionals are starting to get so worried about the ramifications of giving constructive criticisms to our clients that essentially some things are falling through the cracks.
I guess when you bring that up, I know one of the big challenges that veterinarians deal with is in regards to euthanasia and humanely ending an animal's suffering. It was one of the veterinarians that I had talked with prepping for this interview brought this up, and it was something that I hadn't really thought about. But he thought one of the factors of the veterinarians committing suicide was they are so involved with ending suffering peacefully that it becomes to look like more of an option to them than it might to a normal, not normal, not that veterinarians are abnormal, but to people that are not actively involved in euthanasia. And so when things get harder, maybe I just found out I have stage 3 pancreatic cancer or something, then that option of ending suffering with peaceful sleep is more obvious or more readily in the minds of some of the veterinarians. And would you mind talking a little bit about the weight that causes y'all to carry? I know one of the things, I don't think I know a horse trainer or a veterinarian that got into the business for the people. They all get into it for the animals. And a lot of times the bonds that we form with these animals are way stronger than our clients might realize. And euthanizing Fluffy might take as big a toll on the vet as it did on the owners, because they've been seeing Fluffy for the last 15 years too. So would you mind, if you don't mind, would you mind getting into some of that and just sort of sharing some of the realities of that, having that in your world on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so euthanasia is a big component of our lives. On our worst days, we euthanize, like myself. Sometimes I'll euthanize, 5 animals in one day. And so it can be really, really challenging. Sometimes you get experiences where the client wasn't ready to let go of a pet, for example, and, the pet has a really, really devastating condition. And then another animal develops a condition that's, acutely life-threatening. And we end up having to euthanize 2 family pets in one day. We have to make those types of decisions. To me, the hardest part is not the act of euthanizing an animal. The hardest part is the moral distress that goes along with it. So moral distress is when you know what the right answer is, but you can't do it because of outside circumstances. And so an example of that would be like an owner that is not ready to let go at all, even though the animal is suffering severely. And so you have to let that animal walk through the door and probably not come back after you recommended euthanasia, or the opposite, where an owner comes in and wants to euthanize a perfectly healthy animal, or in more realistic cases, an animal that has a chronic but very manageable mild condition. And so those are the things that break my heart. Those are the times where I wonder if I'm doing the right thing or not. I do think that euthanasia is definitely a big component of how accessible suicide is for veterinarians. Our access to controlled drugs is a big one. Use of phenobarbital or pentobarbital, this is the same drugs that are used to euthanize animals, is the primary method of ending a veterinary professional's life. And so this is a big deal. And it's certainly our career that predisposes us to this a little bit more than other occupations.
Well, I think that's definitely an underappreciated part of what y'all do. And typically when people are seeing y'all in that moment, they're so overwhelmed with their own personal grief that they're not capable of seeing what the veterinarian might be going. To me, when you said 5 animals in a day, I'm just, that hell, one a year is rough on me. So
Plenty.
yeah. And I know you probably don't have that sort of relationship with all of the animals, but this will be a little crude, but I think some horse people will understand. There's a veterinarian that I know pretty well, and he was talking about that with horses, and he said there's been horses that have come through here that I could have killed with a ball peen hammer and slept good that night, and then others that I cried like a baby for a week. You just have sort of that relationship that develops with certain ones. And like you say, when you get into those moral dilemmas of, I've definitely had a few customers that were wanting to put a horse down for air quotes behavioral issues, where I'm looking at the horse and going, You know, this horse is not that bad. You just don't have the skills to handle him. But there are other people that could easily handle this animal, and euthanization is not what should be on the table right now. We should just be finding this animal a different home. And that kind of stuff really does it takes its toll, and it gives you. I think it's fair to say that over time that builds up a resentment toward the customer base too, because they put you in that position and you watch them make decisions that aren't good, and at some point you're going to get either jaded or go crazy, one of the two. So it's not difficult to me to see why there would be some mental and emotional health challenges with this profession.
Another aspect of euthanasia that's really hard is that we have to go from, euthanizing our beloved client's animal that we've been seeing for 20 years to going to a wellness or a puppy visit 5 minutes later. So we have literally minutes to seconds to compose ourselves and move on to the next room. So veterinary professionals are extremely good at compartmentalizing during the workday. But when we get off, all that compartmentalization kind of goes to shit. Sorry to say that. But it's just really challenging. And so at the end of the day, all these emotions kind of come back that you've been kind of hiding from yourself throughout the day. So it's really important that pet parents are understanding of veterinary professional struggles. And I think that that's really important. I also think it's important that clients are able to recognize the signs of someone struggling with mental health. And these are same signs as in other humans that are not vet professionals, but there are several of them. Sometimes you'll notice an emotional change. And so sometimes they'll have a shift in their mood. They may be slightly more irritable than normal. They can also be a little bit more reactive, and they can also be more withdrawn. They may show physical signs of stress. So they may have exhaustion, weight changes. They may not socialize as much with you. So you may notice that one of your doctors is emailing you more than calling like they used to. That's a big red flag indicating that they're in need of support and not discouragement. Sometimes they'll have poor self-care. I know this is one that I struggle with. Sometimes, my hair won't look as good as usual. I won't put makeup on that day. Sometimes people will neglect personal hygiene. Some people will overwork. So they'll, comment to the client that they're skipping their lunch to talk to them. They're staying late to talk to them. All of those are signs that they're having a difficult time. And then the most important one that I think is often forgotten about is communication difficulties. So whenever we are in fight or flight mode, whenever we are in a mental health crisis, communication kind of goes out the window. And so there may be changes in those patterns. They may have difficulty articulating thoughts. Sometimes they may appear more distant or disengaged. And sometimes they'll even have trouble engaging in eye contact. So all of these are signs that can tell you that now is the time to be understanding and appreciative of your veterinary professional. Now is not the time to be discouraging.
Well, just some thoughts that brought up. One is that if your vet used to call you a lot and now they email, that might actually be a sign that they have established healthy boundaries. So that could have been the one that was up, till 11 o'clock every night, and finally their wife got or whatever got and said that, look, 6 p.m. you're done. You're not a vet anymore. Now you're whatever you're supposed to be when you're not a vet. So anyway, I'm having just mental fog today.
I totally get it. And I think point. I think that your point was a great thought. It's important that we respect the boundaries our veterinary professionals are making because their life depends on this. And so I think that you made a beautiful point that sometimes if they're emailing you, it's because they're establishing a boundary. It's not necessarily because they're avoiding you. So don't take it personally. Just roll with the punches, and we're here for you.
Yeah. I don't think you should have your vet's cell phone number. If you call them by their first name and not doctor whatever, then you should have, if you're going to be at their kid's graduation or in their wedding, and you have that kind of relationship with them, then that's different. But I think whenever they have that layer of call service between the clinic where you can't call them directly and all, I think that's That's great. And to kind of another point, when you were talking about the vets not maybe not being as good at communication, this is just a funny thing that stuck out from me. But when I was in college, we had some kind of pre-vet club deal. I don't remember what it was, but it come up. It was posters that we did, and I remember one line from one poster, and the poster was like the top 10 signs of someone who's going to become a veterinarian. And the one I remember is you can express anal glands better than your own opinion. And that has stuck with me 25 years later.
I love that. I'm going to start using that in day-to-day life.
That should be a
For
t-shirt,
sure.
shouldn't it? Right.
It should be. It's definitely going to be on one of my future coffee mugs for sure.
There you go. One of the things I was a little surprised when I got to looking into this was when I found out about this this crisis going on. My immediate gut reaction is this has got to be all of the millennials, right? They're these little snowflakes and they're not handling this stuff well, and life gets a little hard, and they don't have the tools or the skills or anything. As I got to looking into it, that's not really true at all. It really is affecting the full spectrum of ages and experiences among veterinarians. So, would you talk a little bit about that? And also, I guess we'll tie this together. Not only is it affecting veterinarians, but it's affecting students as well. So you don't even have to be full on into practicing to be succumbing to some of these challenges and pressures. So.
Yeah. So mental health struggles in the veterinary profession, surpass all age groups. I think all ages are affected by it. I think the younger generations are more vocal about it. And so they're better at self-disclosure. And so typically that's why you tend to hear more about the young people that are affected by it. I think in the older generations, there's still a lot of shame that's attached to self-disclosing mental illness and mental health issues. And so I think that's one part of it. But I do think it's affecting virtually every age group probably equally. I do think that another reason that younger people and students are affected is because we hear a lot more about it. The younger groups, we've been hearing about this. Most of the schools do have licensed clinical social workers or veterinary social workers on faculty or staff to provide support, to give lectures on mental wellness in this field. And so we're a lot more prepared. And so I think that's why we tend to be a little more vocal than some of the older generations. Students have an especially hard time. I'm a proponent of making quite a bit of change within the veterinary school system, especially fourth year rotations and your last year of clinical rotations. And so I think that students have a really rough time due to the lack of sleep, the stress level, and the pressure. But studies have shown that veterinary students have a significantly lower quality of life, higher stress level, higher depression levels compared to the general population of students. And so this is a really important issue that is affecting all classes of individuals. Depression and anxiety can affect anyone. And I think that specifically in the veterinary field, it's really highlighted that.
Well, Dr. Mallory, we start off every podcast with the lightning round questions. These are just the sort of short answer icebreaker sort of things. And these are for points. So you want to be on your A game here. Okay. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. What is your favorite way to relax?
I actually participate in multiple types of dancing. I do salsa, Latin dancing, and I also participate in West Coast swing. I hate exercise, and I'm a big fan and proponent of doing exercise that doesn't feel like exercise. So I got into dancing when I was in vet school and actually having a really hard time mentally. And it has been a lifesaver for me in so many ways.
I think that's great and very much on point with what we're talking about here today. Morning or evening?
Neither. I would prefer afternoon.
Okay. Well, this is going to be a horse question for you, but Bay or sorrel? Do you have a favorite color of horse or dog for that matter?
Mm. I don't know if I have a favorite color of horses because they're all beautiful. I do like a good brindle dog though.
Okay. I'm there with you. I don't know why, but I'm prejudiced against red dogs. Chocolate labs,
Interesting.
German short haired pointers. I just have never been on board with it. I don't know why, but there you go. Does pineapple belong on pizza? It
Yes.
took a
I
long time
think
to
it's a
answer that.
good I think it's a good adjunct. I don't think it's necessary, but it certainly elevates the experience.
Okay. Do you have a pet peeve within this world?
My biggest veterinary pet peeve is when a wife sends her husband who has no information to the veterinary appointment.
Yeah, you get to exercise your mind reading skills at that point. Do you have a favorite beverage?
My favorite beverage would be Coke Zero and Bloody Marys.
Okay. All right. I'm a big Bloody Mary fan myself. Would you tell us something unexpected about you?
I'm actually a triplet, so I have two brothers that are the same age as me. Neither of them went into the veterinary field, probably for good reason, because they could not handle it. But yeah, but I am a triplet, and so things interesting in my childhood for sure. And we're good friends now.
Okay. I'm asking you a bonus question right now, and I have written down my guess on this piece of paper right here. Do you have a favorite veterinary ailment or procedure to perform or look to?
So I love these cases are kind of scary, but I love it whenever I have an animal that's ingested foreign material or what we call a foreign body. And when I have to go in and resect some of their intestines and put together two healthy pieces of intestine after I remove the foreign object, that is the highlight of my days as a veterinarian.
So I was very, 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 very wrong. And I don't know if the camera will pick this up. Cat abscess was my guess because every
Oh,
female
oh,
veterinarian I have ever met, their favorite thing in the world is a cat abscess. So I was
I
wrong
have
on this one.
one more that kind of goes along with abscess, and it's cuterebra larvae. I have one on my desk that's in formaldehyde right now, and it is basically a larva, like a botfly larva that gets laid in wounds. So typically it isn't a cat, and typically it isn't an abscess. And you just get to pop those suckers out, and they are way bigger. Like, objects inside the wound are way bigger than they appear. One time I did it in front of a client and she nearly fainted. So that is another one of my joys in life is to remove cuterebra larvae. And I actually have a fixed specimen on my desk to bring me joy every day.
All right. Very good. So see, I know to another vet that wouldn't be unexpected, but to the general public, the whole I didn't see the intestinal surgery thing coming, but hey, whatever floats your boat, right? If you could have any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
Mind reading, obviously, it would really help make my job easier.
Thoughts or feelings? You more a
Just
thoughtful,
general.
analytical type of
Oh,
person, or more of an intuitive, go by your gut, astrology, crystals, and all of that sort of stuff sort of person?
I think I'm more of a feeling person, and I wish I could get to the point where I was a little more thought oriented so that my feelings wouldn't take over so much.
Okay. That again surprises me with the medical background and all. That's more scientific, analytical, and all. But that's why I ask these questions. You really learn a lot about a person through these.
Uh-huh. These are great.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
I am very indecisive.
This
I
is
make
one
a
of.
lot of pro and con lists.
We'll see. Is that indecisive or is that thoughtful? getting enough data in front of you so that you can make a good decision. I don't know, like this is what I find
Let's go
interesting.
with thoughtful.
There's usually when I say decisive or indecisive, the decisive people answer right away, and the indecisive people take 2 minutes before they answer. But I think you're the third or fourth who has decisively answered indecisive, which I find endlessly fascinating. And I think all of those people are actually decisive. They're pensive. They like to get all the data in front of them, and then when they have enough data in front of them that they feel like they can make a decision, they don't have any problem pulling the trigger. They just don't want to make a bad decision because they didn't have enough data in front of them. So, anyway, normally this is more horse related, but do you have a favorite tool or apparatus that you like within your profession?
So this one I learned about recently from a colleague. And whenever I'm doing those intestinal surgeries that I mentioned, sometimes you need like a set of hands to be able to hold either side of the intestine so that the stuff inside doesn't go into your field that you're working in and cause more contamination. And oftentimes you don't have another set of hands in veterinary medicine. It's not like the movies in, human medical dramas where there's like 18 assistants. We don't have that. We usually don't even have one assistant that's in the surgery with us. And so the best thing I've ever heard of that's not like a legitimate surgical instrument is using single-use sterilized bobby pins for your hair and using those on either side of the intestine to keep everything in place. And so I think that's a really cool trick, and it's one that I will continue to use forever.
I like that. I have always loved when I meet kind of the old country vet, and they've got 1,000 different little ways to fix something in the field where they just figured out something really clever like that to help themselves out. I love that. I really think that's like humanity at its peak operational tempo right there. Do you have a favorite book or movie?
My favorite book is The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Oh my goodness. How? He died yesterday. Did you know that? Did that prompt you to say this? He died yesterday. I had a discussion with this, and that was what I said. All the Pretty Horses is one of my favorite books of all time. The Road is the most depressing thing I have ever read in my life.
So
I want to get into the fetal position right now. You just mentioning it. How can that be your favorite book? Oh,
I can't believe he's passed away. I'm looking it up now just to confirm.
mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. What are the odds? It's like I knew deep down.
I haven't mentioned that book in 20 years or something, and then here twice in 2 days. Anyway, all right.
I had no idea, and that makes me so sad.
See, this is I think one of the coping mechanisms that all veterinarians and people that live high pressure lives is a really dark sense of humor and so forth. And you have to be dark to have enjoyed that book. That is a dystopian nightmare. It's a father and a son walking through hell every single day of their lives until the father gets killed in front of the son. And then, I mean, it's bad. It's just,
it's a great book. It's mainly because of how meaningful it is and the messages it portrays, not the things that happen in it.
Yeah, you can't take that one literally for sure. But, oh man.
And Cormac McCarthy is just a boss.
Yes, I definitely a
great writer.
A unique mind for sure. Okay. I need to go take a shower now after that. All right. Sweet, salty, or spicy?
Sweet. I could eat sweet somethings for every meal.
What is the best ice cream flavor?
Chocolate.
Just plain chocolate with Rocky Road out there where you can also have marshmallows and nuts and stuff in there. Just plain chocolate?
Just plain chocolate plus or minus a fruit.
Okay. What is your favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature? And I've had a couple people that have expanded this recently, so I'll go into cryptozoological creature as well there. Especially since you're a vet. I'm hoping a lot of people just pass on this one. I'm hoping you've got something good for me.
I think anglerfish are pretty cool. Those are the fish that live really, really deep in the ocean that have the little light that attracts things. I'm really fascinated. I was studying evolutionary biology in undergraduate school, and so I'm really fascinated by adaptations and things like that. So the fact that evolution has led to an anglerfish is just mind blowing to me.
Have you seen the fish? I can't remember. It's in a similar. So those are fish that are very, very, very deep at depths that would crush most other. There is a fish down there too that has a transparent skull, and its eyes are actually inside the skull, so it's looking out into the world through its skull, and it's just like this little quarter circle right above its mouth. I mean, every other part of it looks like a normal fish. I'm gonna have to go look that up now and find out what that is. But you just think
Yeah,
about.
yeah, you email me that once you know what it is too, because I'm also curious.
Okay. Oh, and have you ever had a UFO encounter?
I have not, but I've always wanted to, so I'm down if if anybody wants to come visit.
Well, well, I'm gonna award you 802 points. So I think you're our highest score of all time on that
I
game.
love that.
So that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment, your choice.
A compliment.
Whew. How do you compliment someone that liked The Road by Cormac McCarthy? This is going to be difficult. All right. So, as I'm getting to know you, I have to say I'm very impressed by your depth of knowledge and caring for other people. You're definitely a type A personality, but with your organizational structures of these questions and those sorts of things, but you're putting it to good use. I think you would be hard pressed to find a more deserving and worthwhile sort of organization doing the work that you're doing with this. And I know it probably has a personal cost to you as well, and having to have some of these conversations and so forth. So I absolutely applaud your bravery and willingness to take on that challenge. And I have to say too, I wish I had for those of you who don't know, I messed up and forgot to ask her the lightning round question. So we're actually doing this at the end of all of these podcast interviews, and I just learned a whole lot about you through these questions. Really wish I had done this earlier, because you gave me some probably more completely unexpected answers than anyone I have ever had before. So I like that too, when people are not quite what you expect and there's more depth and complexity to them. Cormac McCarthy and just plain chocolate ice cream. I mean, you are a one of one, even though you're a triplet. So very nicely done.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate getting to share my, experiences and getting to share some insights that hopefully make pet owners and pet parents feel a little more comfortable the next time they come to the vet.
Absolutely. And we're also going to include in the show notes the Not One More Vet website and all, and the Facebook page. And I know they have some resources on there, but do you have any other resources that you'd like to share with us for someone that may be experiencing some mental or emotional challenges in their world?
So even for non-veterinary people, there is another resource that we'll share along with the other resources that Daniel's going to post. But it is an acceptance and commitment training guide that you can do online. It's free to the public for $25, and it will help retrain your mind to help form better pathways so that you can be better prepared and respond rather than react to difficult situations.
Okay. Now, I think you had mentioned you're also a fan of meditation and 4-7-8 breathing and some other stuff like that as well.
Uh-huh.
The 4-7-8 breathing is one of those things I haven't actually tried yet, but I've now heard about that 2 or 3 times just in the last week. So my interest is piqued. I'm going to have to go look into that a little bit as well. It's kind of interesting. Some of the mind body connections is one of those things that's real big talk about in the horse world, but some of these things, like, I don't know if you're familiar with, it's one of these big time Ivy League University, Stanford, or Princeton, or one of those did a psychological experiment years ago where they had people that described themselves as clinically depressed. That's probably an oxymoron. Describe themselves as depressed. So I guess they're not officially diagnosed clinically depressed, but they had them stand in front of a mirror and fake smile for 20 minutes a day. And that group experienced at the end of it, something like 80% of them no longer described themselves as depressed. And they experienced a higher rate of getting out of depression than the group given the drugs and all of that stuff. So some of these breathing techniques and all of these things, it's really amazing how you can change your pattern and you change what you get, you know. So anyway, well, Dr. Preston, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it definitely affects things.
Well, Dr. Preston, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. You got an open invitation to come back and talk if we get into there's some other thing we could promote for you. I know you've been I think we can now call you a world renowned speaker on this topic. You've actually gone overseas and done a presentation at this point in time. That's a pretty big feather in your cap, I would say. So congratulations on that as well. And we'll keep in touch with you, and hopefully if there's anything I can do down the road for Not One More Vet, this is definitely a cause I would wholeheartedly do whatever I could do to support. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, do you feel good about it and everything?
Yeah, it went good. And if you need to if you hated something I said, or it turns out not good in one and you need to use it from the other one, you could do that. That's not a big deal either. I don't know if that's really hard to do, but
no, I don't think that'll be necessary. I mean, I think I might even leave the lightning round at the end there, like I had, since I outed myself for forgetting about it. I was planning on mentioning. Well, I guess I can do that right now and edit it back in too. We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.